You don't need to travel far in New Zealand for the scenery to change dramatically. Just an incredible piece of wilderness, which is just full of great opportunities. You want to get out of your car. And Paparoa National Park, if you like primeval rainforests, deep limestone canyons, and beautiful clear water, then you need to hike here. It's a real pleasure to be here and to talk to you all about New Zealand and share some of these great hikes, our favourite hikes. Just to give you a little bit more background, I'm one of the co-owners of Hiking New Zealand. I've been a guide for about 25 years now, and I've been into hiking since I was a teenager, and lucky enough to grow up in New Zealand where we've got so many fantastic opportunities for hiking. And I basically love anything related to being in the wilderness, whether it's hiking, paddling, or mountain biking. And I do like sort of telling a story, so I've got to watch that when I'm doing these webinars that I don't go over time. And I'm also an okay cook in the backcountry. There's nothing more satisfying than at the end of the day in the hills, cooking up a good feed for everyone to enjoy. So what we're going to cover is, firstly, I just want to give you a bit of a background, an overview of Aotearoa, which is the Indigenous or the Māori name for New Zealand, the South Island, where to go and what to do. Don't miss what you came to see. I know it's daunting when you're planning a trip somewhere and there's just this fear that you're going to miss out what's really drawing you to the place. I'm going to talk about planning, logistics, things like weather, our favourite hikes, talk a bit about huts, which are an integral part of our outdoor culture here. I want to talk about our guides. You might want to join one of our hiking tours. So, New Zealand, Aotearoa, it's a young and a very dynamic land. Aotearoa translates to land of the long white cloud, and it's a land of incredible contrasts and diversity in landscapes. This has resulted from 83 million years of isolation, a veritable Noah's Ark that floated off into the Pacific. On board were all the plants and dinosaurs and other animals that exist in southeastern Gondwana land. But most notable was the absence of mammals. Well, the only mammal that now exists, only native mammal, is actually a species of bat, a long-tailed bat. But this meant that our birds evolved in a way that was not only unprecedented, but unique. So throw in a few volcanic eruptions, dramatic upheaval from collision of tectonic plates and glaciation, and they've shaped the land and created these incredibly diverse and unique landscapes. So stepping into the forest in New Zealand can literally feel like stepping back in time. We've got native flora that has evolved very little since those days way back in Gondwana land 80 million years ago. We've got a population of 5 million people spread over 3 main islands, so that's pretty sparsely populated. Those islands are North, South, and Stewart Island. We have 3 official languages, being English, Māori, and New Zealand Sign Language. And so Māori is the Indigenous language of New Zealand, which we're very proud of. And if you're traveling here, you'll notice that a lot of our place names share both the English and the Māori place names. And of course, just get it out of the way now, there's been a lot of sheep jokes about New Zealand, and you will see sheep here, and no road trip is complete without coming across a mob of sheep on the road. This is a mob of sheep that I came across on one of my last trips. I was guiding on the way to Fiordland or Milford Sound, and so there used to be over 60 million sheep in New Zealand in the early 1980s. But nowadays the national flock's at about 28 million, and that's due to a change of farming systems. You'll see more dairy farming, more horticulture, vineyards, and forestry, which has all led to a decline in the national flock. If you are out on a road trip and you come across a mob of sheep on the road, don't panic. Just move slowly through them. You don't want to wait at the back or you'll be there all day. So what to go, what to do and where to go. Just to help you get your bearings. In the South Island, we've got this range of mountains which runs the length of the island from north to south. They're the Southern Alps, or also referred to as the Main Divide. And that forms this natural barrier, which is 650 kilometres long, between the east and the west. The Southern Alps can be crossed at 4 different points by road, at Lewis, Arthurs, and Haas Pass, along with what's called the Divide on the road to Milford in Fiordland. So On the west coast, it's very wild and rugged, sparsely populated. There's a lot of bush, a lot of the land is still in native forest, and it's got very wild and rugged coastlines. The famous Fox and Franz Josef glaciers are right down in southwestland, where the glaciers descend right down into the rainforest. And so I think no sort of trip to the South Island is complete without a road trip right down the west coast. You don't want to rush it. You look on the map, it doesn't look far, but there's so much to see along the way. You want to get out of your car and into the rainforest, climb high in the Southern Alps, explore these rugged coastlines. And then east of the divide, we've also got some amazing landscapes there, and it's distinctly different from the west. And that's, due to the physical barrier that the Southern Alps form. Here you'll find big, majestic landscapes, sweeping Patagonia like lands with high glaciated mountains forming a spectacular backdrop. So with stunning landscapes and lots to see on both sides of the Southern Alps means you need to do a loop or weave your way down the island. And what to do? Well, I just say immerse yourself in nature whatever way you can, whether that's hiking, biking, paddling, and just take your time. About a third of New Zealand is in public conservation land, and couple that with a population of only 5 million people, you're never far away from nature. So there's great opportunities to get out, be active, and explore our backcountry. And one thing which I'll talk about more at the end is there's over 1,000 public conservation huts that you can stay in, which vary greatly in the services they offer. Some are very, very basic, but some are more elaborate and need to be booked. And there's thousands of tracks. We hear a lot about the Great Walks, which are amazing, and I'm going to touch on those. But there's tracks everywhere, so ample opportunities to get out and experience nature. So I just want to show just a short little clip here that gives you an idea of what life is like on the road. Enjoy the drives. Our roads are different. We don't have many big freeways. So just, be aware if you're driving and take your time, keep left, of course, and make a point of getting out into the regions, visiting those out of the way places. There you have it, the South Island, and you can see that little route marked on there. I'm basically going to talk you through our favourite places or hikes and national parks which are along that route. So you'll also hear the South Island referred to as Te Waka a Maui, which is the canoe of Maui. And so there's Maori legend has it, Maui fished up the North Island and then so that's because he wasn't allowed to go fishing with his brothers. And the South Island represents the canoe that his brothers were out fishing on. And it's also known as Te Waipunamu, the waters of Greenstone. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. The national parks we're going to talk about are Abel, Tasman, Paparoa, Arthur's Pass, Aoraki Mount Cook, Mount Aspiring, and Fiordland. So the big thing is don't miss what you came to see. It's great to get out and hike and explore these wild and wonderful wilderness areas of the South Island, but make sure you are prepared and informed. And a great source of information is the Department of Conservation website. And they also have some fantastic visitor centres around the country in places like Queenstown and Wanaka, Aoraki Mount Cook, where you'll be going for those hiking experiences. Now, New Zealand does experience very changeable weather conditions. You can get any sort of weather at any time of the year when you're in the mountains, and this can be deadly if you're ill-prepared. It is important to do your due diligence, just respect where you are. With our altitude, it's not high altitude hiking, but we're so close to when you're never far from the coast, so the weather systems will change very quickly. So it's just making sure that when you go out hiking, you're prepared for those changes in weather. Not all our trails have bridges over streams and rivers. And in fact, in a lot of routes into the backcountry, we use the rivers and streams as a means to get places, so we're crossing rivers a lot. So it's a matter of being very respectful of rivers because they come up and they'll flood and they'll go down quite quickly as a result of our changeable weather. So you always want to be aware of the weather, checking the forecast and being prepared to sit it out and not cross the river if it's flooded. And learn how to cross them safely. when not to cross, and just don't do these routes if it's raining heavily or forecast to do so. So our favourite hike. So starting at the top at the northwest of the South Island is Abel Tasman National Park. And I sort of talk about it as being one of the more civilised places to go hiking in the South Island due to the excellent water taxi service that operates in the park. And this enables people to choose which sections of the track they want to do, so you're not committed to doing the whole thing. And you can even have your pack with food dropped off by the boat at designated points along that track. And this region also enjoys some of our best weather too. So lots of sunshine hours, and the low altitude means it's generally mild conditions. And you want to take your togs or your bathing suit, because there's some amazing places to swim in the sea and in rivers as well. So if you're doing your research, check out Project Janzoon, which is a philanthropic conservation trust which has invested millions into restoring the ecology of the Abel Tasman National Park. That really is quite incredible, and just in the last 20 years that I've been going there, you can see so much change and so much restoration happening. So I recommend getting out into the north end of the park. It's less busy and equally beautiful. Tonga Quarry is a good place if you've got 2 days, want to have a little overnight experience. Get the boat out to Tonga Quarry, and then you're on the Abel Tasman Coastal Track, which is one of our great walks. Walk back to Embark Bay, great place to camp. That's where we are there. And then the next day, you can wander through to Anchorage and either walk all the way out to Murahau from there or get picked up by a water taxi. Abel Tasman is renowned for its beautiful golden sand beaches, and it also has very large tides between 5 to 7 metres. So that trail is crossing estuaries at several places. And so you need to take this into consideration when you're doing the track, that you're arriving at these tidal crossings generally within about 2 hours either side of low tide, so you can get across. If you're not, worst case scenario, you just have to sort of sit it out and wait for a while. And that picture on the left there, if you look at that thin strip of sand, that is Bark Bay. And that's the campsite just stretched along there. Wonderful place to camp. A hot tip if you're staying there is get up early and go for a sunrise swim. And it's probably one of the few places when you're hiking in the South Island of New Zealand that you'll end up doing this, just kicking your boots off and walking along in bare feet. When you're crossing these tidal crossings, it's better just to go barefoot and get the sand squelching between your toes rather than getting your boots wet in this case. So the coastal track goes from bay to bay, and it gently climbs over headlands in between. Just to give you a bit of history, this area was first settled by Europeans from the 1850s, although there's evidence of Māori being here from as long as 700 years ago. The Europeans cleared the land for farming, but the soils, which were largely granite, proved infertile and access was difficult. So farming as a venture was pretty much abandoned, and then the land just slowly started to revert, but people had grown very fond of this area because of the beautiful beaches, great boating. So it definitely wasn't forgotten about. And then in 1942, it got declared a national park, which was at 300 years to the day after Abel Tasman first visited the area. And so he was the first European to come out to New Zealand. So it's wonderful to hike in these areas and just really see how nature is once again reclaiming this land after it was cleared. And a lot of that is nature taking over, but help from the Janzoon Trust, which has done a lot of predator control, introduced predators which prey on our native species, our native birds. So they're to thank for a lot of the success there. And that bridge there is the largest bridge you'll cross on the track, and that goes over the Falls River. And you've got to visit Cleopatra's Pools, get in at the top there and go down this sort of natural hydro slide. And that's great fun. It's a nice smooth ride, and it spits you out at the bottom down that pool. Now, it's something really cool to do in Abel Tasman, and we do it after we've been in the park for 2 nights. We join a lovely little company called Waka Abel Tasman, who run waka tours in the park, and we paddle their double-hulled wakarama back to Kaiteriterre. It's about a 10k paddle, and this is a really cool way of sort of rounding off our time in the park. And culturally, it's really cool. You get to learn more of tikanga Māori, which is tikanga Māori is all about the customs and the values and the protocols, and to be sort of officially welcomed with the traditional mihi whakatau. It's a lovely feeling gliding along the water in the waka. You get along pretty quick, actually. It's a very efficient way of traveling. And while we're paddling, we get taught a few of the traditional Māori war chants and just learn some of the fascinating stories of the people that have been before us in that area. So I'll just play you a little clip here. So yeah, you don't need to travel far in New Zealand for the scenery to change dramatically. So what I keep stressing is don't be in too much of a hurry. It may seem like a small country on the map, but when you get here, you'll realize that there is so much to see. So you don't want to bang out an 8-hour drive in one go because you'll miss all these cool things along the way. Next favorite area is Paparoa National Park. So we've left Abel, Tasman, and now we're traveling down the west coast. Paparoa National Park, if you like primeval rainforests, deep limestone canyons and beautiful clear water, then you need to hike here. Paparoa is also home to one of our newest great walks, being the Paparoa Trail, which can be hiked or biked, mountain biked in 2 to 3 days. And the great thing about that trail is actually it accesses some of the backcountry of Paparoa, which was pretty inaccessible until that track was built. But if you do this hike with us, where we go up to a place called the Ballroom Overhang, you'll need to cross the rivers, but you'll leave your boots on, and then you'll be having a true New Zealand tramping experience, as we call it. Yeah, tramping's when I grew up going off on my hikes, you didn't say hiking, you said tramping. But yeah, one important thing, when you're crossing the rivers, leave your boots on. It's just not really practical to be taking them off and putting them back on all the time. I mean, you look at the boulders in this picture, it's just, it's too dangerous to be walking over that ground in bare feet, and it'll just take you all day if you're putting boots on, putting them off. And contrary to what people will often tell you, wet boots don't give you blisters. They've never given me blisters. I think your boots actually get more comfortable when they're wet. So this route up the Fox River takes us to this remarkable campsite under a large rock overhang, which is technically a fluviatile river camp, and it's an amazing place to camp. While we're up here, we explore this side canyon, and we sometimes even swim through a cave, which is a pretty neat experience. But yeah, heading up here literally does feel like you're stepping back in time. West Coast beaches are the best, but they're generally not great for swimming due to undertows and rocks, and generally pretty rough, steep beaches, although it's looking quite calm here today in Hokitika. And if you get the chance to visit Hokitika, one thing that happens every year is the Wild Foods Festival. It's usually around early March, which is a pretty amazing experience to sample some local wild cuisine. And of course, you don't have to hike every day. The South Island has some incredible cycle trails like this one that runs from Greymouth to Ross on the west coast. You can ride the whole thing or part of it. You can hire bikes in Hokitika. We like the Canary to Kumara section, which is about 35 kilometres, takes 4 to 5 hours. You go through beautiful forests, cross suspension bridges. There's amazing gold mining history and picturesque reservoirs. Yeah, here's one of those bridges. And I love those pungas, the giant tree ferns, which are pretty typical of this area. If you're biking in New Zealand, just remember that our brakes are opposite to the northern hemisphere. So when you're coming up to that sharp corner and you slam on the brakes, it's the left one that you want to be putting on first, which is the back brake. So crossing over to the east, everything starts to change, in particular the vegetation. Here we're going through beech forest, which is the most common type of native forest in New Zealand and is more predominant on the eastern side of the divide. This is Arthur's Pass National Park. Yeah, one of my favourite places to hike, and it's only about sort of 2 hours from where I live. We're looking down the Horden River here from Horden Hut. This hike goes from near Arthur's Pass village up the Edwards River, over Tarn Cole and out the Horden, and it can be done in 2 full days or 3 or 2.5 days. It's an epic trip, very challenging, but it offers a bit of everything from river crossings, untracked terrain and alpine passes, and 2 great huts. Also the chance to see some fairly unique bird life from our which is a native duck, which only lives in fast-flowing mountain rivers. There's the tiny wee rock wren, which you might see up on the passes, our alpine parrot, the kia, and the orange-fronted kakariki, which is only found in this valley here, the Horden Valley, and the next two valleys over, which is the Polta and the south branch of the Huranui. And these birds were actually believed to be extinct twice, but then they discovered a population in here back in the late 1990s. And there's been a huge amount of work done in recent years doing predator control, trapping things like stoats, rats, also wild cats, which prey on these birds. So there's up to about 300 to 400 of them now, but numbers are starting to grow thanks to that predator control work. One of the huts that you'd stay at on this hike, the Edwards hut. And you're talking about rivers. This is a hike you wouldn't attempt when the rivers are in flood or heavy rain is forecast, because you'd be crossing this river here several times, the Edwards River. And yeah, just the big thing, if you do hikes like this, is if you don't feel confident to cross, just back out, wait for the river to go down. This shot here, the river's at normal flow, it'll get up to your knees. And crossing, if you're hiking with other people, crossing in pairs where you join up, grab a hold of someone's pack strap, that's the best way to cross. Keep your boots on, and you're much more secure, and it means if you stumble, someone's got you. So that's the best way to do it. I love this drive coming west to east because the landscape is just changing constantly. And we've gone from those steep rainforested valleys up over the pass, and now we're getting into these big braided river systems, your big sort of savanna-like grasslands, and the Craigieburn Range. And this place here, curated, I recommend stopping here. We go here and we just sort of wander in amongst the crags. You can climb right up to the top. Very sacred to Māori, or the South Island tribe, which is Ngāi Tahu. And curated actually translates to treasure from a distant land, because they used to store kumara here, which is sweet potato, which was a staple food for the Maori. And they would rest here on their way over to the west coast to go and search for ponamu or greenstone, because it was only found in certain rivers. So yeah, it's got spiritual significance, but also amazing geology. The rock here is tertiary limestone, mudstone, sandstone, and tuffs. And the limestone is formed from layers of organic sediment, which is deposited in deep oceans far from land. And these layers are then compressed into soft, soluble rock. So this area was once a large, shallow inland sea that began to infill some 30 million years ago, and pressure over time has caused extensive uplift and folding and faulting of the Torles and Craigieburn ranges, which we look out on from here. So it's now, and this has created a pretty amazing playground for rock climbing and bouldering, or just to wander through like we do. So yeah, our journey continues, and we're now on the east side of the divide, and just remarkably different from being on the west. So our highest mountain in Aotearoa is Aoraki Mount Cook. Aoraki translates to the cloud piercer, and we can see Aoraki just in the right of this picture. So that is 3,724 meters, or 12,218 feet. And there's actually over 19 peaks that are over 3,000 meters in the park. So when you go to Aoraki, you just feel like you're surrounded by these giants, because the valley floor is quite low. It's sort of 700-800 meters. So there's some great day walks you can do from the village, including walking up to Sealy Tarns and on up to Mueller Hut, which is a hut you can book and stay in. And that gives you that sort of classic experience of staying in an alpine hut. And there's also going up the Hooker Valley. From here, we can look down onto the Hooker Glacier and the Hooker Lake at the end there. Yeah, this environment is so dynamic and changing, partly due to sort of the glaciers, and of course, like everywhere in the world, they're receding and they're leaving these big exposed moraine walls. And that has meant that access to the peaks has got notoriously difficult for climbers over the years. So just to sort of really emphasize how dynamic this landscape is, on the early morning of 14th December in 1991, 12 million cubic meters of Aoraki Mount Cook collapsed, and it roared down the east face. So and then plunged onto the Tasman glacier on the valley floor and spilled up the other side. So that landslide travelled 7.5 kilometres at an average speed of 200 kilometres an hour. And remarkably, no property was damaged. There were no fatalities, but there were climbers on the mountain that had a close call. The edge of the slide passed less than 300 metres from Plateau Hut, where they were readying themselves for an attempt on the summit. Yeah, note the milky water in the river, which is draining the Hooker Glacier due to the glacial flow, which is all that ground up rock from the glacier that gets suspended in the water. So the summit consists of 3 summits. From south to north, there's Low Peak, Middle Peak, and there's High Peak. And that route along the ridge is known as the Mount Cook Mile. So despite its modest height relative to other mountains internationally, to approach Aoraki from 700 metres above sea level is very technical and challenging climbing with a high level of glaciation. And it's often underestimated as the weather can change dramatically, and it's so sort of dependent on snow and ice conditions. The climb crosses large crevasses, and there's always the risk of ice and rockfall and avalanches. So yeah, often when we're going to Aoraki, people ask, "Oh, we're going to climb Aoraki?" And we don't. We go hiking in the valley floor and get amazing views of Aoraki, but Aoraki is definitely a mountaineer's summit. Great views can be had from climbing high on this outcrop, which is above Red Tarns on the way to Mount Sebastopol. Now, I've just load this video, which is right down the west coast at Fox Glacier. Another one of our favourites is Mount Aspiring National Park. Just to give you get you orientated, we were in Aoraki National Park, which at the main divide borders Westland National Park, and that then to the south of that borders Mount Aspiring National Park, which borders Fiordland National Park. And together they form what is known as Te Wāhui Pounamu, or the South Westland World Heritage Area. That area of wilderness is over 2 million hectares and makes up something like 10% of New Zealand's total area. It's just an incredible piece of wilderness which is fully protected and just full of opportunities for adventures and experiencing nature. We go up this valley here, which is called the Matukituki Valley, and we actually walk through it's farmland on the way up, beautiful farm, Mount Aspiring Station, and the national park boundary is reached just before we get to the hut. The Milford Track and Milford Sound is probably one of our most famous destinations. It shouldn't really be left off a trip to the South Island because it is such a remarkable place to visit and lots of opportunities for hiking and also getting out on the water. Milford Sound is at the end of the famous Milford Track, and so to really enjoy it, you need to get out on the water. And there's cruises that operate. It takes about 2 hours, and you can get right out to the Tasman Sea, or you can also explore it by kayak. Some of our iconic landscapes. This is Milford on a fine sunny day, but it actually rains on average about 182 days of the year, and the average rainfall is about 7 metres. So when I'm planning a trip to Milford, if a few days out they're having all these beautiful sunny days, you kind of know that by the time you get there, it's going to be pouring with rain. But that is also really cool, because if you look at this landscape here and just these vertical rock walls, when it rains, you just get these amazing waterfalls everywhere. So I was saying earlier, we have over 1,000 huts in New Zealand, which are public huts, and they really are an integral part of our outdoor culture. They're an amazing asset for us to all enjoy. They vary tremendously from something that resembles a large dog kennel, which we call a bivvy, to huge huts, which are found on the Great Walks that can sleep up to 50 people, and they'll have gas, flush toilets, and they'll have a warden. This hut is one of my favourites. It's more of a typical Backcountry hut. That's the Edwards hut we go to in Arthur's Pass. That's about a 3 to 5 hour walk from the road, and it sits above the tree line. It's got a fire. It's not bookable. So yeah, that's a good thing when you're staying in huts, which I really urge you to do so. If it's not a bookable hut, because most of them aren't bookable, yeah, you want to go with a bit of a contingency plan. If it's likely to be busy, you might not get a bunk, and so it's always a good idea to have a bedroll or a thermarest. You might want to carry a lightweight tent or a fly if you'd rather, not share the hut if it's full. For those huts that aren't bookable, you've got to, you can assume that you will get a bed. But huts are a great way to meet people. All pretense is left at the door. Sharing a hut with strangers is a great leveler. It's always been, growing up and getting into hiking as a teenager, it was just fascinating and meeting all these different people from all walks of life. But it doesn't matter what people do when you're in that hut. You're all in it together, and it's very sort of a very egalitarian type experience. How to ensure a great experience when staying in a hut? Basically, always being considerate and kind to other users. Keep the noise down late at night or early in the morning. And being welcoming to late arrivals, even if the hut is full, because that could be you next time. There's nothing worse than rocking up at a hut late in the day and you're wet and tired, and the first thing someone tells you is that the hut's full. So generally, there's a culture of just making room for people. But you can plan your trips accordingly. Long weekends, popular tracks, the huts will be busy, that, so you just got to sort of work around that. Pack out what you pack in, so there's no facility for dealing with rubbish. What you take in, you take out. Leave the hut nice and tidy, sweep up. If you use firewood, you go and find some other wood to replace it, some dead dry wood, and you keep your gear together in the hut just to avoid it spreading out everywhere. So this is a hut we go to in Mount Aspiring that I just wanted to show you. So just to give you another example, this is a much bigger hut, and this is a great base for exploring the upper reaches of the Matukituki Valley, and some other huts such as French Ridge and Liverpool Biv can be accessed from here. I just want to play this short video for you. That's Milford Sound. An incredible day is to go out on the water in the morning, and then in the afternoon go for a hike on the Rootburn track. And this is a view from the place called Key Summit. This track is accessed it's about half an hour from Milford Sound. You come back up, you cross the divide, and then it's about a 3-hour round trip to come up to Key Summit. You look across at the Darren Mountains and down to the Hollyford Valley. This is a great walk, and it can be done over 3 days, 2 nights. In total, it's about 38 kilometres, so not a huge distance. This is, I showed you before, a picture of Aspiring Hut, which has just had a revamp and was completed in February. It just needed to be brought up to earthquake code. So that's what it looks like now. And this is a place that we stay on our Ultimate South tour. And that's a view from inside, looking up the valley towards Mount Aspiring. This is a shot here looking out over Lake Wakatipu from Queenstown. And Queenstown is, you've probably heard of it, but it's our adventure capital of New Zealand, or adrenaline capital. There's a lot of extreme activities that you can take part in here, but it's also a stunningly beautiful place. This lake was formed by a glacier in the last ice age. It's ringed by mountains, notably the Remarkables across the lake. On our Ultimate South tour, we have our last night of the trip here, so it's a great base for people to do further exploring and adventures from. This is just looking out at the Remarkable Mountains across the lake. These 3 guys here, we've got Chai and Erin and Sarah. They're all our Ultimate South guides. Our guides come from a range of backgrounds, but they always have real-world experience, which reflects the level of responsibility and the skills that they need to run these amazing trips. Let's give you another little video snippet here. It'll be a good opportunity now just to talk a little on some practical hiking tips, some preparation. And I love this photo here because it just shows, it was sunny in the morning when we started out this day. So it shows what you need to have in your backpack to stay comfortable and safe when you're getting out in the mountains in the South Island, in particular Fiordland. So always check the forecast, pack warm and waterproof gear, some form of communication. Often there's no cell phone reception in the backcountry. So if you're doing getting into the more serious trips, you'll want to consider taking a personal locator beacon. Tell someone where you're going, get advice from a local. But locals love to give advice. And just remember, any fool can take a raincoat on a wet day. This shot here is up in Gertrude Valley, which is near Milford Sound, where I was saying gets 7 meters of rainfall a year. You've got to be prepared for all conditions. That photo there, you can see those folks there are heading off for an overnight hike, and that's so they're well equipped. They've got good backpacks. They'll have a sleeping bag, enough food to keep them going, and equipment to be. So that you just want to think about being self-reliant, having everything you need to look after yourself and your group. Thank you, everyone. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to be able to, have an audience to talk about New Zealand and some of our hikes.